Hello, and welcome to the Orthodontic Products Podcast. I'm your host, Alison Werner. In this episode, we're going to talk about how 3D printing continues to change orthodontics, specifically the move to direct print aligners. My guest, Dr. Jeremy Manuele, is a Las Vegas-based orthodontist and early adopter of in-office 3D printing technology. He shares how his practice made the leap to direct print aligners, what he's learned along the way, and what orthodontists should know before they bring this technology in-house. Here's our conversation. Dr. Manuele, thank you again for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So before we get started, can you tell me about your journey with 3D printing in your practice?
Yes. So, our journey started, about 7 years ago or so. And like many docs at the time, we were using alginate and experiencing all of the appliance fit issues that often accompany that technology, whether it's the impression having a mistake or the stone models. And so we just wanted our appliances to fit better. And so we're like, hey, well, let's look into this. And so we ended up doing some research. I think the first printer we purchased was and it wasn't the Sprint Ray. It was even before that. I forgot the name of it by now. Formlabs. It was the Formlabs.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was the early Formlab printer. Yeah, so that was the first one we got. And we started printing models to send to the lab for our different appliances to be made, because those were always made locally. And at the time, our lab didn't even have a printer. And so that was the start of it. Our appliances came back and they started fitting amazing, like every single time. We weren't adjusting them, they weren't rocking, and it may have even been closer to 8 or 9 years ago. But yeah, it was eye opening for us. We're like, hey, there's something here. And for us, it was really like as soon as we got into printing, it was a no-brainer. It's like, why didn't we do this sooner? And one of the big concerns I had, I remember this initially when we first got our first printer. I was like, man, what is this going to be like? Is it going to kill all my time? Am I going to be spending hours and hours like working through and training and doing all this? And the cool thing is, like, even back then, it was like almost plug and play. Like my team had some training with Formlabs at the time, but by and large it was plug and play. Like, I was so not involved in the process, and it took so little of my time to get it off the ground, and I was just experiencing better fitting appliances. So that was kind of like where it all started for me. And then shortly after that, we started to have the software companies come around that were like, hey, well, we can digitally move teeth. And this is back in the days of like Mesh Mixer, right? Like that was like, you had some dentists and orthodontists, they were like playing around, hey, this is how you can move this tooth in this 3D design software.
Yeah.
And I looked into that a little bit, but it was like quite a cumbersome process. You had to learn the software, and then even then it's like you're trying to make a 3D modeling software work for dentistry when really it wasn't intended for dentistry or orthodontics. And so I didn't spend too much time in Mesh Mixer, but shortly thereafter you started to have some actual software companies develop tooth moving software specifically. And that's when we started to do like our retainers, our clear liners, limited cases. Like, well, let's set these up, let's print a series of models, and let's suck down the models, and maybe we can avoid having to pay $500 for a limited aligner case or whatever we were paying at the time. And so that was sort of what got us initially into the world of 3D printing. And then from there, from the time we actually started fabricating appliances in our office, specifically clear aligners, like that's when the learning, like that's when your learning really starts to accelerate, because you start to experience and understand things that you never had to think about before, right? So when you're ordering aligners from a company, like you do the setup and they send them to you, and like you just put them on. Like, you don't think about, well, where should that trim line be, or what about like this set of teeth compared to this one? These ones have more undercuts. Or what if I use this thickness of material compared to this one, or this type of material compared to this one? So you have a world of options at your fingertips when you start to take some of these workflows on into your office. And by having these abilities, it can be overwhelming to some extent, because there's so many choices. Like, what do I choose? But if you do spend some time and start to figure out, like, hey, well, this works better in this situation, this works better in this situation, well, now you can start to customize your treatment plan. You can start to customize your systems, and now you can come up with something that's actually working better in your office, that's costing you less and helping patients get through treatment, even faster. And so that was sort of like when things started to take off. And from there, we've just progressed to better softwares, better printers, better resins, better everything. And that's the journey that, we're still on today.
Yeah. Okay. So where are you now with 3D direct print aligners in your practice?
Yes. So with 3D direct printers, we onboarded that technology in the beginning of this year, the end of last year. So the end of last year, we bought a printer. So like December 2024, we bought a printer. I think it was delivered January of this year. And that was kind of our first experience with direct print aligners. And at that point, a year ago or so, even still, like, this is pretty new
Yeah.
technology. I mean,
Hmm.
there's been some docs in Asia that are using it, like, here and there, and like a handful of doctors here and there, like, doing a couple little things with it. So our expectations were pretty low. Now, ironically, the reason that one of the biggest reasons I decided to get a 3D printer is I wanted to change my phase one retainers,
Ah,
because, like, with these materials you can customize them and make them whatever design you want.
yeah.
Turns out the workflow for that is not so simple, and due to some issues that come up with staining and things like that, we actually haven't even done that.
Okay.
But we did start to direct print aligners for our patients, and we started out with limited cases. And then now, the last 3 months or so, the only cases that I've started, all comprehensive cases, moderate cases, limited cases, everything has been in direct print aligners. And from what I've learned, even just over the last year, like, I truly feel like this is the way everybody's going to be
Hmm.
going. Like, if you asked me, like, do you think it's there right now
Yeah.
today? Like, is the technology here ready to plug and play? Like, plug it into my office and start going tomorrow? I would say no. I would say there are definitely still things that need to be worked out. Now, can it be plug and played? Yes, but just know that it's not really plug and play. It's like, plug, flip this switch, that switch, turn this on,
Yeah.
hold this thing right. You know what I mean? There's some workarounds that you have to know about
Okay.
in order to make this successful in your practice. But, like, as of the last 3 months, that's the only aligner system that we've generated in our practice.
Hmm.
And so it's definitely possible. And the bugs, so to speak, that we're working through will continue to be worked through. Things will continue to get better. And the potential is there. That's the most important thing for me. It's all about, what is the capability of this system.
Hmm.
Like, is it capable of producing either A, better results, or B, results with less hassle, less attachments,
Hmm.
or C, like better fit, aesthetics, better patient experience, shorter treatment times. So if it can provide all of those things, well, I want to be on the forefront of that. I want to learn how to get all of that value, even if it's at the expense of working through the current problems in the systems, that are there today.
Yeah.
And we can dig into as many of those,
Yeah.
both sides of that equation as you'd like. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, before we go further on that, talk to me about how these direct printed aligners are different from traditional aligners.
Yeah. So, traditional aligners were made on a stone model. You pour up the stone model, you use the plastic, you heat it up, you suck it down over the top. That's like, original, the OG clear aligners. So that transformed into then using a 3D printed model, right? So
Hmm.
you can make it out of most commonly it's out of
Yeah.
resin. Some of the bigger companies use nylons and other materials like that. But essentially, you 3D print a model, and then you have the model of the teeth. Instead of being in stone, it's in a resin, and then you use a sheet of plastic, and it goes in and forms over that as well. And you can use it over and over again, right? So
Hmm.
that plastic doesn't deteriorate, it doesn't break when you pull the aligner off of the model. And so if you need an extra one, you can just do another suck down, or you can have two or three retainers made off the same model. So that was a pretty big breakthrough. It
Yeah.
was also much more accurate, right, from an overall accuracy standpoint. Now, even though it is more accurate, it's actually in some ways less defined, right? So when you have a stone model that is accurate, that's captured correctly, that there's no bubbles,
Hmm.
like, you'll see very, very precise anatomy on these models. And with 3D printed models, you'll often see those layers or ridges
Hmm.
of where the print is happening, and so it's not quite as
Right.
refined. If you're not careful with that, with your settings and the type of printer you use, you can actually create an aligner that's not as good,
Hmm.
that maybe is not as retentive or doesn't work as good. But by and large, they work just as good, if not better, because overall they are more accurate. Like, one tooth's not going to have a bubble in it, for instance. If you capture the scan correctly, it's going to be printed, accurately, even though it may not be quite as high resolution.
Hmm.
Routinely as like a plaster stone model was, if that makes sense. Now, I mean, you could print them at a super high resolution with the printers that we have now, but most people don't, because what we found is that you don't need to, right? There's a certain level of resolution that's fine, works for those cases. So that's typically what we print at, so that we can just have the volume and have our workflows not be slowed down by waiting 15 hours for like a 1 micron print
Hmm.
to go through or whatever. So, and I would say today, most doctors who are doing 3D printing are 3D printing the model, and then they do the suck down, and that works very well for what most people would call in-house aligners. So now with direct 3D printed aligners, the system is just like it sounds. So instead of printing any intermediary model, anything like that, literally off the printer build shelf itself is going to be your clear aligner. Of course, it'll have supports and whatnot in order to maintain its accuracy, but literally the resin itself is transformed into the aligner itself via direct printing. And so this is unlike any other material. Other suck downs and any other liner companies up to this point have been, a suck down material over something else. Now these materials are directly printed. So it's not one sheet of plastic forming. It's literally hundreds of layers being built throughout that whole process. And understanding that helps us to understand then, why the mechanical properties are different, why the problems that we see are different with these aligners compared to traditional aligners. And then you can start to understand the positives and the negatives that go along with having this new system.
Yeah. Okay. And as I understand it, with direct 3D printed aligners, you can control, in theory, the thickness of the aligner in different parts of the aligner. You can also incorporate features directly, like cutouts, bite ramps, undercuts, all those. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't even say in theory, like this is absolutely in practice today. You
Okay.
can control the thickness of the aligners
Okay. So
in,
you
in
are
any
able
of the
to. Okay.
100%, yeah,
Okay.
and you can do even like gradient occlusal surfaces, for instance. I mean, that's one of the features within the software that we use, meaning that it'll kind of thin out the material in the occlusal of the posterior
Mm-hmm.
and make it a little bit thicker as it moves more anteriorly, and that allows for the aligner to be a little bit more comfortable. Because if it's too thick in the back,
Mm-hmm.
then patients, they tend to hit on the back only, and it can be uncomfortable. And again, these are things you don't think about when you're doing a suck down, because one of the differences between a suck down is that the thickness is not uniform.
Right.
Right? The material itself is going to stretch more over the incisal edges than it does in an undercut or on the flat surface of the tooth. So if you were to get out your Bowley gauge and measure every single individual point of a suck down aligner, you would see it's all over the map. The material may have started out 1 millimeter or 3/4 millimeters, but if you actually measure the actual thickness in all these different places, it's very variable. With a direct print aligner, the thickness by default is 100% uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say 0.75 millimeters, that means every single surface of that aligner is 0.75 millimeters. And so that's when they realize, hey, well, maybe we don't need 0.75 millimeters everywhere, and that makes it a little bit more uncomfortable for the patient, because now they're just hitting in the back instead of kind of like they're used to feeling and hitting more of the teeth together. So now they'll thin out the material in the software itself, make it thinner in the back and thicker in the front.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point about adding auxiliaries, yes, you can add a button anywhere you want on the aligner, and it's going to integrate. It's going to be directly printed, so it's almost like a direct bonded composite onto another big clob of composite. It's just it's solid. It's not
Yeah.
coming off. It almost turns it into one piece.
Right.
And so your buttons are stable, and you can design those in a way that you can make sure that the aligners are retentive. And I would say one of the most interesting and probably most powerful things that we're just starting to harness is the ability to engage undercuts. So an undercut is any surface of the tooth that creates retention, meaning that like if you're looking straight down at the teeth, you'll see the teeth, but there's some part of the tooth underneath what you're seeing, like that kind of curves inward, and those undercuts are what allows us to grip onto those teeth. And so traditionally with suck down materials, the material itself does not engage the undercut completely. And that's good in a lot of ways, because if it did engage the undercut completely and you were using suck down plastic like all the other aligner companies have, and if it actually engaged those, that aligner material is so rigid and so thick that you wouldn't be able to get the aligner off. You probably couldn't get it on, but even if you did get it on, you wouldn't be able to get it off, because it's just too much force in those undercuts. Well, now we have the ability to precisely hug those undercuts. We can 360-degree wrap around that tooth, and at the same time we can start to control the force that we place on that to make it to where you can get it on and off. And that to me is one of the biggest game changers as far as how we practice orthodontics and how we use clear aligners to get to the end result. Because in theory, and again this part is in theory we can dial that in so precisely that we need no attachments on any teeth ever, right? So that's the theory. Now in practice, the comprehensive cases that I've been doing over the last few months range anywhere from 2 attachments, like maybe just on the maxillary canines, to I think the most I've done on a direct print case is like 8, like 4 per arch, like 2 on each side, 2 in each quadrant. Compared to my traditional suck down aligners routinely have 12 plus attachments. And so it's definitely different. When the posterior teeth have significant undercuts and there's not significant rotations or anything else like that going on, then those teeth will track. They can move, they can upright, and they don't require attachments like they used to.
Okay. Yeah, because that was going to be my next question. Do these typically require more or less attachments?
Oh,
So,
by far, yeah, by far less, and for those reasons precisely, and that's where what I've really been trying to experiment with. I had one case that I was like, we've never been able to just move a lateral incisor down. Like we always try to do that. We have to hook a button to it, a rubber band, the attachment, tip it forward, and then move it back. So I tried to just like moving it down in the software, and it moved down a little bit, but so we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Like it kind of just started to pop off the tooth, and even with the reactivation, which we haven't talked about a lot yet, but even with that reactivation, I wasn't able to just pull it straight down. So I'm like, okay, so we went ahead and rescanned, and now I'm going to try, like, again, no attachment. I'm going to try a protocol where we tip it facially first, create a little space, and then move it down and back at the same time. So that's like the typical staging protocol that we would use with our, with our former thermoform plastic aligners, but without an attachment. So
okay.
it didn't seem like there was enough undercut to pull it straight down or enough force to pull it straight down, but I'm hoping that we can tip it forward and then pull it back again without attachments, because lateral incisors, if you talk to most orthodontists who do a lot of clear aligners, that's one of the pain points, right? Getting those teeth to track predictably and end up where they're supposed to can be quite difficult, even with attachments. And so that would be a breakthrough as well if we can come up with a system that works without attachments in that area as well.
So is that a question of software or material?
Mostly, well, so material and then software workflow, right?
Okay.
So the material has to be strong enough and to create the force on the tooth. In order to hug the tooth or put the force on the tooth, you have to have an undercut. So there are some, like peg lateral incisors, for instance. There's no way we're going to be able to pull those down because there's nowhere to pull from. But most lateral incisors do have undercut. And so it's a combination of how much undercut do we need, how much force do we need at those undercuts, and what staging movements do we need to make it happen. So the more undercut we have, and the more ability we have to add force to that undercut, i.e. maybe making the aligner margin a little bit more gingival so it adds rigidity in that area, maybe making that portion of the aligner a little bit thicker so that it again is more rigid in that area. And then using a good staging protocol, like we mentioned, maybe tipping it forward, creating a little bit of space, and then moving it down and back at the same time. So you're almost creating more of a surface to push from. Like between the combination of those things, I'm optimistic that eventually we will figure it out. We'll figure out how to do it, predictably.
Okay. So let's talk about the resins, and those are key to all this. How did the materials, kind of in your opinion, the materials used in these aligners differ in terms of like flexibility, durability, force delivery? What are you seeing?
Absolutely. Yeah, the resins in 3D printing in general, that's been transformative over the last decade. I mean, there are so many new resins coming out. We started out with just a resin to print models with. Like that was huge. It's like, oh, we can print models. And then it was like, oh, well, now we can do splints, and now we can print in different colors and do dentures, and now we can print fake teeth and glue them onto the teeth. As it relates to orthodontics specifically, another breakthrough was indirect bonding, printing those indirect bonding trays. So they came up with resins to do that. So now we're talking about the resins for these direct print aligners, and really there's only two on the market in the United States that they're really getting much hyper buzz. There might be more, but there's really two options that when people are looking into implementing into this practice, they're looking at either Graphy or Lux Creo, and they're very similar in their properties. And so basically they both work off of the same principles. Each of them have their own proprietary, formula, compilation, whatever. But it's a multi-layer material, and they're both thermodynamic. I think Graphy calls theirs shape memory. Lux Creo might call theirs active memory, something like that. But this is important for if you've never heard about these direct print aligners, or you've never heard anything about direct print aligners. This is one of their most unique features that unless you've researched it, you probably would have no idea about. So what this thermodynamic nature of the aligner means is that when the aligner distorts, or becomes crushed, or you run it over with a car, like you're not going to do that, right? But when you put it on your teeth, the teeth do stretch out the aligner a little bit. It distorts the aligner. And when the aligner is distorted, of course, it's not able to produce the same forces that it was before it was distorted. And that's a problem with every single aligner material we use.
Yeah.
And with the suck down materials, we tried a lot of different things to overcome that. You do like multi-layers. It's like thick on the outside, thin on the inside. This one's squishy. Like there's a lot of, great, inventions and ingenuity that have come about trying to solve the problem of force decay, meaning like, hey, the force started out great, but toward the end of the aligner, it was gone. And so when you think about that with traditional thermoformed plastics, if you lose a little bit of, you have a force decay on the first aligner, well, now the second aligner has to make up for that force decay, and then the third aligner has to make up for the force decay in the second aligner. So you're constantly chasing your tail essentially, and by the time you get to your 30th aligner or your 40th aligner or your 50th aligner, that is one of the underlying causes of why these teeth tend to get so off track, is because even if the forces were designed perfectly in the beginning, that force decay stage after stage after stage after stage after stage adds up to the point where it's like, well, now the force is not sufficient to actually make the movement that we need because these aligners have distorted so much. And everybody that does clear aligners has seen this. The patient comes in, they're on aligner number 40, and they get it on somehow. They smash it on, they bite it down. They basically immediately distort their retainer. Their teeth are clearly not straight, but they're wearing their aligners, they're putting them on. And if you wear your aligners 3 hours a day, that's what will happen. You'll have force decay and you won't have movement of the teeth. So compare that with direct print aligners. Yes, you have force decay. And in fact, direct print aligner forces per thickness are actually less, almost about half. So when you look at, like, if I just were to make, like, take a like an Invisalign aligner or whatever, an Angel aligner or a ULab aligner, like if I were to just take one of those and pop them on my teeth, the force of those aligners would be almost double what it is if I take a direct print aligner and pop it on my teeth.
Okay.
So initially that seems like bad. It's like, oh, geez, are these even going to have enough force to move teeth? But it turns out that both amounts of force are plenty. And in fact, the suck down materials have more force than is needed to move teeth. All right, they have that because, again, they're trying to eliminate that force decay. So if you start out with more force than you need, well, as the force decays, hopefully you still have enough force to move the teeth. That's the theory. With the direct print aligner materials like Graphene and Lux Creo, what their approach is yes, the force is less, but that force can be renewed, and that's where that thermodynamic, the properties come into play, the shape memory, the active memory. What happens is when these aligners are distorted, and we could link a video. I don't know if we can link a video in the description, whatever. I'll send it to you, and I'll show you a video of an aligner that's literally like almost tied into a bow. It looks like a ribbon. It's so distorted, and we did that on purpose just to demonstrate it.
Yeah.
We throw it in a glass of boiling water, and boom, it's right back to its original shape. And that's the material properties itself, and I'm not privy to how they design that or why it does it, but there's enough elasticity in there that it reacts to heat. So when it reacts to heat, it goes back to its original shape, and then once it's at its original shape, then once that water cools down, then it hardens. So basically the hot water makes it back to its original shape, which restores its original shape, and then it hardens, which restores those original forces. So now it's as if every time you do that boiling protocol, you're getting a brand new aligner, a brand new set of forces. So even if there was force decay throughout the day, which there is, by time you do this day after day after day after day, by time you go from aligner 1 to aligner 2, there's almost no force decay left over, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so promising as far as getting through our cases faster, because if we could get through every single case with zero force decay, then we would literally only ever have one set of aligners.
Right.
Assuming we staged the case correctly. We would have the aligners that move the teeth, assuming all the movements were possible, we staged it correctly, we would get that result every single time. And so that is the direction it's headed. Are we there yet? No. Are we there on some of these cases? Yes.
Yeah.
I've had cases where I set up one set of aligners and we get to the end and their teeth look exactly like it does in that last set of aligners. I learned this the hard way because with every other system I've ever used, I've planned force decay into my movements, meaning that, I know that if the tooth starts out, mesiolingual, then if I program it to perfect, it's still going to be a little mesiolingual because of the force decay. So what I do is overcorrect that, right? A lot of us will do that. We'll overcorrect the rotations. We'll overcorrect intrusion. We'll make all these extra forces in the aligner system because we know that the force is going to decay. Well, I started using my direct print aligners in that same way. I started doing these overcorrections, but then I'm going and I'm looking when these limited cases are done, and I'm like, dang, the tooth is actually overcorrected. Like it actually moved to the point where I put it, and I'm like, wow, that is fascinating. And so, yeah, that was when I really started to know, like, this is where this is going. Like, this ability to move teeth in this unique way is, yes, it's at its infancy now. It's still just barely getting off the ground. But I believe in 5 years, like, this is going to be like most of the progressive practices across the country are going to be doing this. And I would have said the same thing 10 years ago about printing, and I think that's correct.
Yeah.
And 10 years ago, we were one of the earlier docs to get a 3D printer,
Yeah.
right? And then 5 years later, everybody's got a printer. Like, especially, at least all the progressive practice, they have a printer.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're at with direct print aligners right now. I think that right now you have a few people that are working through the kinks, like myself. And we haven't talked about the kinks yet, but we should, because it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in 5 years from now, I think a lot of these things are going to be worked out, and you're going to see, like, practice after practice. You're going to see a lot of practices using it. And I'm excited for that, because the more practices that jump into this, the more we learn and the more we share with each other, and the faster this progresses. So, some days I feel like, a lone ranger. There's like 10 of us across the country who are doing much of this. And it's like, okay, well, that's great, but like, we need like 1,000 of us, like, let's join together and like really get this off the ground, because again, I think this is where it's going.
Well, I was going to ask you about how this has affected staging your cases.
How does it affect the staging, or how does it change the staging? That is what I'm still experimenting with. So, the question is, how much can you move the teeth per stage? Now, force decay has a big part of that equation.
Right.
So the more force decay that you have, the less you can move per stage, because the force decay is too much. You need to kind of like replicate that same movement in the next stage to a certain extent, and you have to have those movements close enough together that when this part decays, it'll kind of get picked up with the next aligner, and then when that one decays, it'll get picked up with the next aligner. But the less force decay that you have, theoretically, the faster you can move the teeth per stage. So if you have an aligner that can be thermally activated every single night, well, instead of like 0.1 millimeters per stage, can we do 0.2 or 0.3 or maybe even 0.4? Like, how much can we push it? That would help to drive down our costs, right? Because we're using less material. It's also more friendly for our environment. So I think that both of those things are important. Right now, I basically kept the staging the same as what I do with my thermoform suck down materials, as I'm working through all of the other things about using direct print aligners. But once we get some of these other things dialed in, that's to me like the next step. Like, how far can we push it?
Yeah.
Like, can we do double? Can we do double the amount of movement? There's that balance, right? If you do too much movement, it is going to be too much force decay, and it won't be able to recover. I mean, eventually you boil these things. I would imagine if you boil them 100 times, like, they would probably, break more, crack more. I'm sure they have some sort of, wear them out effect. So, how long they take to get worn out, what that force decay is, that will determine how much we can move per stage the aligners. For me, at this point, that's not the most important thing, because, I can print more aligners. It's not so cost prohibitive that I need to, skip 3 aligners, and print 1, 3, 6, 9. Like, I can just do 0.1, 0.2. My standard is 0.25, a quarter millimeter linear movement, or 2.5 degrees angular. So that's kind of like my normal go-to velocity, which is actually quite a bit faster than a lot of aligner companies do still. So, yeah.
I know you've mentioned in talking here with the shape memory, using heat or hot water.
Yes.
And I know from my own research and interviewing some other people in the past on this technology, typically the patient would put it in some kind of hot water to reactivate it. Are you having them do that with these materials and these aligners that you're printing?
Yes, and I think that this is super, super important. I think if you skip this step, your experience with direct print is you're going to try it, and I've talked to docs who have done this. They've said, "Hey, well, yeah, I just want to do direct print aligners because like that's cool, like whatever, less waste, it's fine, and it's easier. I can just print directly, less cleanup." But they just give them to their patients and pretend like they're the normal thermoform aligners, and they're going to act the same way, and they don't. There is force decay on these direct print aligners, just like there is on thermoform, and there's less force. So you're going to have more problems with this system if you never reactivate that force. If you just try to like give them the aligner and say go, you're going to have more problems because there's less force than with a traditional system. So in my opinion, it's critical. Now you have a couple of options on how you do it. So currently we print out a little paper. It has the instructions. It's like, hey, these are like the most advanced aligners available. Like these are reprogrammed every single night, and this is how you reprogram it. It restores it, so it restores the forces of a brand new aligner. I say it probably way better than that on the paper because I think I had ChatGPT help me. But that's the nuts and the bolts of it, right? It's like, okay, these are cool. And this is what you have to do to make sure that they work well for you. And so we have them just boil some water, put it in either a mug or a bowl, and you throw them in there for 5 minutes. And then you can either let the water cool completely, like leave them in for 20 minutes, or you can like cool the water down, just put cold water in after that 5 minutes, and that's it. Pop them back in. We also have instructions for how to clean them, because that's not something we've talked about yet, but staining is an issue, regardless of what any company may tell you. 100% it's an issue. But that's an issue that we are working through, and we can talk more about that too if you want.
Definitely. Okay, so let's, before we go down that path, let's talk about, you talked a little bit about this, but what are the biggest pros and cons compared to the other aligner systems on the market?
Yeah, let's break it down. So what the biggest pros, right? So the biggest pro, in my opinion, is the ability to use less or no attachments, and the ability for the teeth to track more precisely and achieve movements that we otherwise couldn't or less predictably achieve. So those are the biggest benefits. As an orthodontist, it's like those are the biggest takeaway nuggets. I can get through my cases more predictably with less attachments. Like 100%, those are the big ones. Now, other benefits, I mean, less waste to the environment. You can print them directly in your office, so turnaround times can be very short. It's easier as far as manual labor goes. You're not trimming models, with instruments and slipping and accidentally hitting your finger, whatever. Like, so from a safety standpoint, those are all good benefits as well, but kind of more incidental. The big things is like, hey, I can move these teeth better. I can move these teeth faster. I can move these teeth with more precision, and cost, right? Like if you can dial the system in and you can use less aligners and less treatment time, you're going to pay less because you won't need $1,000 per case. You won't need that many aligners. You can finish much faster. So those are the big benefits. Now let's talk about the drawbacks. And again, this is as we're recording September 25th, 2025 is when we recorded this, right? So drawbacks as of this date, right? So I would say one of the biggest drawbacks is staining. And again, staining is, and a lot of doctors are like, okay, well, they stain, I'm not going to use them. Well, okay, that's fine. But like, staining, in my opinion, is a pretty minimal trade-off and also something that you can work through. So that's what we've been doing. When we first got the aligners, we noticed that many of them would stain. Like I put them in my own mouth, like after I brushed my teeth, only as retainers. Like I didn't eat food, I didn't drink anything, and literally the aligners would stain, to some extent. Now, was it severely stained? No, but it was stained, like, noticeably. You look at it, it's like, oh, that's not as clear as it used to be. So the reason that these aligners stain is because it is a layered material. It is not one sheet of plastic that, like a window, right? I mean, like your windshield doesn't stain, right? I mean, everything just slides off of it. A sheet of plastic typically doesn't stain because it's one continuous sheet. These aligners are printed in layers. So even though you can't see the microscopic layers, they are there. And little small particles of food and saliva and whatever else that's in your mouth goes into those little microspaces and causes it to yellow, causes it to, all the things. So, for most patients, I would say 80% of patients, if they are using either a little bit of peroxide or an Efferdent tab, and I tell patients to use, the Efferdent, Polydent, Retainer Bright, one of those, just because in addition to the staining, it actually, it makes the taste better too, which can be an issue as well. We can talk more about that. So if 80% of patients, if they do that, they're not going to have issues with staining. So that eliminates, 4/5 of the problem right there. So now we have that last 20%. So, and maybe it's closer to 15, but there are some patients whose aligners stain very quickly and very severely. I mean, you would have to show some pictures online, but like dark, like darker than you've ever seen a retainer, essentially. It's pretty wild. So for those patients, what we have found works the best is 3% hydrogen peroxide mixed with an Efferdent tab. So instead of mixing it with water, you mix it with peroxide. Now you can't boil peroxide; it gets all foamy all over the place. So you kind of have to do your boiling protocol and then your cleaning protocol, or the opposite. You do your cleaning protocol and then your boiling protocol. You can't do them both at the same time if you're using 100% peroxide. But we even have experimented. You can get 12% peroxide on Amazon, and pretty much like that'll kill anything. I mean, I'm not recommending that to my patients because like you get it on your hands and your hands are turning white, like it's bleaching everything. So yeah, it's very, very strong. But yes, typically with just a regular 3% peroxide and a disclosing or a cleansing tablet, it's going to take care of that extra 15 to 20% that do stain more. And initially we didn't know how bad this was, so we had patients come back and they're like, I'm not wearing these, like I can't wear these to school, like look at this. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, we got to figure this out. So that's when we started just like trying things out, like what's working. I mean, we had enzymatic tabs that we had ordered, I think, from Henry Schein. We were ChatGPT and we were researching like what can we do to get rid of this staining, and that's what we came up with that seems to work the best. is the hydrogen peroxide with the disclose or with a like a cleaning tablet
Okay.
and ultrasonic. Sorry, I should mention and
Mm,
ultrasonic. So
okay.
we put those in your typical ultrasonic cleaner. So
Okay.
Lux Creo does make an ultrasonic cleaner that does heat up,
Hmm.
but I don't know if it's like widely available yet.
Okay.
So we ordered one and kind of tried it out, but we're
Yeah.
not providing it for our patients yet. If you go on Amazon, they make some really good ones. They're like $35.
Hmm.
It's an ultrasonic and it also has a UV light.
Mm.
The UV light actually does interact with hydrogen peroxide to that's like zoom whitening. That's the same principle, right? So you
Yeah.
have the bleach and then you have the light, and those two together work best. That's the same thing. You get a $35 ultrasonic UV light cleaner on Amazon. You put some hydrogen peroxide and a disclosing tablet in there, and it takes care of the sanding. So yeah, it
Okay.
works great.
Okay. And then the aligner quality is holding up for that stage with no problem.
Yes, we have not
Okay.
had any issues with degradation of the aligner quality due to the cleaning. Okay,
Okay.
so we haven't talked about breakage yet. That's a thing as well. And so we'll go through that.
Okay.
But no, due to the cleaning itself, there's been no patterns of like, oh, well, I did this many boiling sessions or whatever. And in fact, we have had patients that just aren't as compliant, that
Hmm.
instead of changing them out every week or 2 weeks, I mean, they may change them out every 3 weeks to a month,
Mm.
and they're still boiling them every night, and the aligners are still holding up. So I don't think that process is super degrading to the aligner
Okay.
itself. I'm sure at some point it causes stress on it, but that's not the biggest
Okay.
thing.
Okay.
Breakage is caused for other reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit more about the drawbacks. So we did staining,
Yeah.
breakage.
Yeah, so we can talk about breakage. So we've all had aligners that can crack, right?
Hmm.
That's something that we're familiar with from traditional suck down aligners. Things can crack and things can break off of clear aligners as well. The longer that you have suck down clear aligners, the more likely things are to fracture. If you don't believe me, just have one of your patients come in that has had a retainer for 2 years and try squeezing the back of it to like adjust it. It's going to snap
Mm.
most likely. So they start out very more flexible, and then over time they get more rigid. With the 3D direct print aligner material, there is a certain level of rigidity that I would say is I don't know how to describe it, but like we'll have issues with certain patients where when the force is high enough, you will see failure fracture of the aligner material itself.
Okay.
So for instance, like maybe they're a clencher and they're biting down on their their maxillary or their mandibular right second molar,
Hmm.
and then they just bite and they hit this one spot all the time. Well, it can cause like basically that piece to kind of like fracture off essentially. We've
Okay.
seen that a handful of times.
Okay.
Some other interesting things, and this is something I had never seen before. You're familiar with the concept of turbos to open a bite,
Yeah.
which basically means that we build in the aligner, not on the teeth, but we build in the aligner these little ramps,
Hmm.
and these ramps are what the lower teeth bite into. And the idea is that as you're biting on these ramps, it's either pushing the upper teeth up into the gums or the lower teeth down to the gums, and the bite is opening.
Hmm.
So we've used these turbos forever in order to correct deep bites, and they're very, very effective.
Yeah.
But most of the time, with your turbos, it's a hollow turbo, right? It's made on a suck down, so the turbo is printed on the model, and then the suck down is done over the model. So the turbo thickness is the same, thickness as the rest of the aligner.
Yeah.
Well, with these direct print aligners, you don't have to do it that way. You can actually fill in that turbo, so now you have a solid turbo
Okay.
instead of a hollow turbo. So the hollow turbos, they would just crush. Like if you had too much force on them, they would just crush down,
Hmm.
and that one would be distorted. Like talk about the force decay,
Hmm.
that would be distorted, and then you move on to the next liner, and you get some good force for a minute. Then they crush it, and that's kind of how it went. And
Okay.
patients who crushed them really quickly tended to get less benefit from it, and patients who tended to just keep gentle forces on those turbos tended to get more benefit because it allowed time for that force to actually move the teeth. Well, now with these direct print turbos, that turbo is one solid block.
Right.
So you can bite down on it, but it's not crushing, right? I mean, it's very, very
Yeah,
solid. So if the turbo doesn't crush, then what we've discovered is, well, the other part of the aligner that's hitting the turbo can quote unquote crush, or, for lack of a better
Yeah.
description, like fillet open. So we had this come in like last week. The patient's like, "Oh, every time this, this aligner, it just splits in half. And I was like, it splits in half? I was like, what does that mean? I was thinking, okay, well, maybe there's a crack somewhere,
Yeah.
right? That can happen. Maybe they're pulling it off a certain way,
Hmm.
and it's caught. But I look at the aligner, and literally it's kind of split in half right
Yeah.
at the canine. And I'm looking at the case, and I'm like, dang, there's a turbo right above that. And I have her bite down with a new set of aligners
Yeah.
in, and sure enough, like that is the point
Mhm.
where she's hitting. And it's just like, because the turbo itself doesn't decay,
Mhm.
all of that force is right on that one area. So what we did, and again, because we can customize this, is we made a note in her chart. And my lab technician, Melanie, she is phenomenal. So she keeps notes on every single patient, on every single setting that we use, how tight, the gap fill, the thickness of the material, gradient or not. And so anytime we have any issues with patients, she will write it down. We're not printing all the aligners at once. We're printing like the first 3 upper, 3 lower, and then we'll print 6 upper, 6 lower. And as we're going along, we're taking notes and we're making the aligner better and better and better and better. So as we get through treatment, it's only fitting better and it's only holding up better. So for that patient that we saw last week, we went ahead and made a note, said, hey, go ahead and do 2 things. So one, we're going to move that turbo more palatally or gingivally, however you want to think about it, so that it's not the only one hitting, because there was other turbos as well. They just weren't hitting on them. So we adjusted those turbos to where they were more even, and we had her thicken up the incisal edge of that canine so that if they hit on that, it's not going to be as likely to split open. So again, that you have the ability to do that now. When you notice that there is a problem with a case cracking or breaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other drawbacks?
Let's see. We talked about staining. We talked about breakage. Okay, taste. Taste can be a drawback. Now, I think that is mostly a post-processing issue.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're post-processing correctly, I don't think you're going to have issues with taste.
Okay.
At least that's been my experience with Lux Creo. I don't know. I haven't used Graphia enough to know. I've only ever tried them out. They've sent me a sample pair. But with Lux Creo, if you do the post-processing correctly, I don't see that as being an issue.
Okay.
But if you're worried about it, then I would say those cleaning tablets are good, not only for the staining, but it also is usually they're minty, right? So when you pull it out of the cleaning tablet and you've done an ultrasonic, like all that mintiness is, throughout your whole aligner. So we have not had issues with taste, knock on wood.
Okay.
But again, we do recommend they use a cleaning tablet, so that could help with that.
Okay.
Yeah, other drawbacks to breakage. Yeah, so one of the other things is that these aligners do feel noticeably different in your mouth while you're wearing them. So traditional suck down aligners are smooth. It's one piece of material, and so the external surface of the aligner is also very smooth. Like you can't really feel anything except for smooth surface, and your teeth just sort of feel the same way but with plastic over them. So with these direct print aligner materials, it is printed in layers. Now, granted, the layers are a lot closer together. So like if you look at them with the magnifying glass, like the layers aren't as big as they are, let's say, with a thermoformed or with a direct print model that prints in bigger layers. But there are layers, and when that actually prints, you can feel it in your mouth. So it kind of feels, it doesn't feel like sandpaper, but it definitely feels more rough compared to the feeling of a thermoplastic material. So if you have a patient who has been wearing traditional suck down type aligners, and then you give them a direct print aligner material and you don't say anything, like they're going to notice, and they may or may not like that. I would say they would be more likely not to like that than they would be to like that, because again, we tend to like smooth things, right? So when you feel something that rough, it's just, you feel like plaque on your teeth feels rough, right? So it's not a feeling that you want to feel necessarily. So that's something, again, that you're going to want to get ahead of. You're going to want to preface that, right? You're going to want to tell them, hey, if they've worn aligners in the past or retainers in the past, just like, hey, this is the brand new material. It's going to feel different on your teeth. This is why. And, again, explain, like, these are the properties that allow us to reactivate the memory, help your teeth move better so you don't have to have attachments all over, just start going over all the benefits again so that they understand, like, yeah, this is okay.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to me some more about how you're prepping the patient for this type of aligner.
Yes. So basically, every time we have a new problem, we add that to the list of things we talk to them about in the beginning. Yeah, you know what I mean? Because it's like, at the end of the day, it's like we don't want to, under or over promise and under deliver. We want them to have a great experience. We want them to get a great result, and we want to make sure that we're as transparent as possible. So the benefits of these systems are real. They will finish with less attachments. They will finish earlier. Their teeth will track better. But there are these drawbacks as well. They might break. We have to customize them. Like, it feels a little bit different. They can stain, like all these different things. And I think that's where, I think that is the biggest reason why this hasn't taken off more than it has. Yeah. Because, I mean, the companies behind it are oftentimes, they're underselling the problems. They're like, oh, they're only talking about the benefits. And when doctors actually start to use them, well, they see the problems. But a lot of docs aren't as motivated or interested in fixing them, right? So it's like, oh, this is a problem. I don't need a problem right now. I'm just going to go back to what I was doing or go to something else. I think that for any direct print aligner company out there, like, I think that they should be very, very upfront with the current challenges. I mean, it's not like they're not going to find out. Like, if they're using a lot of these aligners, they're going to see all of these things happen. So I would rather, them be on board with helping us deal with these complications rather than us have to take these on ourselves and figure out every little thing that can happen. And so that, and that's the thing. I mean, like I'm not like working directly with, look, I use Lux Creo now. That's the printer that I have. That's
Yeah.
the aligners that I use. I chose them because all things considered, their force levels are a little bit higher
Okay.
than Graphene per aligner, and I felt that was a benefit. But like, I'm not like on their clinical board of directors or whatnot. I mean, like if I have a big issue, I can email them.
Yeah.
But I mean, truthfully, I probably should work closer with them so that in addition to just solving the problems in our practice,
Yeah.
we could actually hopefully make some more, systemic changes and resolve some of these products more globally,
Yeah.
or some of the problems more globally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you, okay, I'm just curious, do you send the patients home with any kind of extras, or what are the instructions you're sending them home with? Because you mentioned the staining.
Yep.
What are you,
Yep.
what are you telling them?
Yeah, so we have all the in-house, branded aligner bags, blah blah blah. So they send home with their aligners, and we also give them like basically a starter kit of Effordent tabs.
Okay.
So they have some, you know what I mean? Because we want that. The last thing we want them to do is we tell them to do something and then they don't do it, and again they have that negative experience, whether it's because they didn't do it or just because. I would rather provide them with the potential experience right off the bat. So we'll give them whatever it is, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cleansing tablets, so that starting day one they can use it. So now they know what that's like. Now if they run out and they choose not to use it afterwards, well, at least they know that if they use it, they'll be fine.
Right.
So and they may not be a big deal to them. Maybe they stain a little bit. It's not a huge deal. That like they taste great. They're not worried about it, and that's fine. That's their choice. But I want them to have that at the beginning, so we give them that, and then we talk to them about the process, and we give them written instructions on how to do that cleansing process. So it goes through the boiling, the procedure, like why, all the things is written out, and we explain that to them before they go. And so, that's kind of the process that we use when we deliver the aligners.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of patient feedback and just appointments, how is that going?
Yeah, we use direct remote monitoring.
Okay.
And so so all these patients typically, if they're more than 6 stages, if they're anything more than like a very limited case, they're all going to be scanning weekly.
Okay.
And so or biweekly. So we'll have them, basically we'll be checking the fit, we'll be giving them feedback about wearing them, about doing the boiling protocol. Like we'll check in on all those things to make sure, hopefully make sure they're compliant.
Okay. So now let's talk about the workflow for the doctor and the staff. Is it more efficient or more demanding? You talked a little bit there about how with your lab tech, she's only printing so many at a time. So tell us more.
So it's a great question. So to answer that directly, as of right now, it is definitely more demanding from a computer standpoint, 100%.
Okay.
Like probably doubly more demanding from a computer standpoint.
Okay.
But it's quite less demanding from a fabrication standpoint.
Okay.
So basically, the way that it works is you have to kind of have 2 or 3 different softwares. So you have to have your tooth moving software, right? So I use ULab. There are other ones out there, but you have to have your tooth moving software. Lux Creo, I think, has their own kind of tooth moving software as well that I haven't really used or experimented with.
Okay.
But you have to have something to actually move the teeth.
Okay.
So once you move the teeth and you have the stages, you have like, okay, here's our 10 stages that we're going to do. Now you have to export that into the software that will then generate the actual aligner. So the aligner shell itself has to be generated. Like it's not just like you give it the model and it's like, oh, let me spit out an aligner for you. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Maybe one day that'll be what it is. But as of right now, the beauty of it is you can customize it, but the bad part about it is you have to do it for every single stage. So like if you have 20 stages, then you have to go through and design every one of those aligners.
Okay.
And like labeling and thickness if you added here versus there, all the settings, like they have to be copied to each individual stage. So there is like an AI feature that sort of like automates some of that for you and can spit out aligners much faster. But if you do that, again, you lose a lot of the customization. And so again, like a lot of docs are like, oh, this sounds great. I just want to use the AI. And the company is like, they're selling this AI as if it's like going to work on everybody. And it may work on like a lot of patients, but there's a lot of patients that it won't. So like if you really want to have consistent quality results like right now with the current systems, you have to customize it to some extent. And that takes time. Now, a lot of docs are trying to take that on themselves, and I think that's a mistake. Like that part doesn't have to be done by you. In fact, I don't even hardly know how to use that software at all. Like I trained on it like once when we first got the printer. I haven't opened the Aligner Designer software since January when we trained on it. Like my lab technician, Melanie, she's like, she's amazing. She does everything. So she like, she like I'll make notes to her. I'll say, hey, print it this percent, or do the, like extra tight or not tight, or do
Mm-hmm.
like trim the aligner scalloped or straight, or extend it this much. Like I'll give notes about what I think
Mm-hmm.
might be needed for that case based on their anatomy, based on how proclined the teeth are. So I'll give her some some ideas. But again, she's been the one collecting feedback and data. So every time we get feedback on how it fits, it goes into that binder. She's pulling up the case and looking at it. And it's like, oh, well, those crowns were pretty short and it fit this way. So next time, let's try this. So she's actually able to dial it in probably better than me. So I give her feedback based on what I think. And
Mm-hmm.
then she kind of meshes that feedback that I give her with her own experience and the data she's gotten from the patients, as we give her chairside feedback.
Okay. And talk to me about like what was her experience before you started using direct print aligners?
Yeah. So she'd done quite a bit with 3D printing in general. So she
Okay.
was around when we ordered our first 3D printer, right? So she had gone through like different softwares,
Mm-hmm.
ULab, RCAD, like all the things, and she went through onboarding model printing,
Okay.
and then she went through onboarding indirect bonding tray printing. So she had already done both of those. We use Sprint Rays for those two processes. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually have three printers. One I use to print models, one I use to print digital indirect bonding trays, and then
Okay.
one we use to print the direct models because I hate swapping out resins,
Okay.
right? I mean, the Lux Creo printer can do all three. Like we can
Mm-hmm.
print everything that we need on one printer, but then you got to
Right.
swap out
Yeah.
resins, and it's a whole, it's a mess. So we have three different processes. So Lux Creo was the third process that she had integrated into our practice. So she did have experience with 3D printing in general,
Okay.
but just not that specific type. And there are some differences. Like for instance, the build plate is it's more of a membrane. Like the build plate is almost made out of like a nylon, like Kevlar type material. It's not metal. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't scrape it like you do like with the metal ones. So
Okay.
there are definitely some nuances, some differences because the precision of these aligners is much higher.
Okay.
And when it came for me, like onboarding this process, one of the reasons I decided to go with Lux Creo is that they have a completely integrated system, meaning that every single step of the process is controlled by them, and you use their stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
the design of it, to the printing of it, to the post processing of it, to everything. So Graphy is open source. So essentially, you can use different, like Graphy is a material,
Yeah.
and you can use different printers to use it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the plus of that is that you can probably get involved with it and use some of the equipment that you already have. But the downside of it is you do lose a little bit of the I don't know if I want to say quality control, but like the predictability of
Mm-hmm.
having the same system. Like everything about Lux Creo has been designed from start to
Mm-hmm.
finish for that specific system.
Okay.
Whereas with Graphy, it's a material, and then the printers and the different things are kind of like worked backwards to fit that resin, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so in terms of her workflow, she's doing that CAD design then. So
Yes.
understands that
Yes.
software. And then
Yes.
she's doing the printing. What's the post processing like?
Yeah, so the post processing is more involved than model printing.
Okay.
So essentially, like there's like multiple alcohol baths instead of just one.
Okay.
They have like like basically like it's like a kind of like initial alcohol bath and then like a final alcohol bath. And then they have like the curing unit induces heat as well as light. So the post processing does take longer than with like a traditional model.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the total post processing time is about an hour ish,
Okay.
like a total. Yeah. So in the printing time, is probably like 25 minutes. You can fit about 12 arches on a
Mm-hmm.
build plate. So basically, you can spit out about 12 arches per, let's say, hour and a half.
Yeah.
So we routinely will do next day deliveries. So if
Okay.
like, and sometimes even same day. Like if it's the early morning, she can get
Mm-hmm.
it done by the afternoon if
Oh.
a patient wants to start same day.
Okay.
But routinely we'll do next day. So let's say they come in and they want to get started, so we can generate the quick three, which is like the first three aligners.
Mm-hmm.
We get those files out. She designs them, gets them printed. And by the time that whole workflow is done, it's probably 4 to 6 hours. And so if we do it by the next day, that's great. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty easy to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said before that she's only printing so many aligners at a
Yep.
time for the
Yep.
patient. So like maybe the first three or something like that.
Yeah, so we always start out with the quick three, and the quick three that's a protocol that we used even before direct print aligners for anything that was in house.
Okay.
The quick three, what it does is even before we were using direct print aligners, and when we were using more attachments, the first three aligners were just quick, they were easy, the patient can get started, and it does a couple things. So one, is it kind of starts the physiology of the tooth movement. So they're wearing aligners, the teeth are starting to move. So you're kind of activating all the processes, if that makes sense. Two, it allows them to get used to the aligners without attachments on there.
Yeah.
So, they don't have like attachments, rubber bands, IPR, like whatever else may be involved in the case. Like that doesn't start until 6 weeks in when they're already very comfortable wearing, aligners at that point. And so, when we switched to direct print aligners and when we started using more of those, we just continued that same workflow. But the difference is like now come that 6-week visit, there are a number of cases we don't add any attachments to. Like if the clinical crowns are a little bit longer or there's significant undercuts, like we don't add attachments. We just let the undercuts and the crowns, use that as undercut. If the crowns are short and they're like little nubby teeth, like then we will make the gingival margins longer. So we'll extend the gingival margin of the aligner so it covers the gums a little bit, and we'll thicken the area where the small bit of undercut is, so we can get, again, good retention, and we'll shrink the model down a little bit. So we'll do all those things to get better retention on short clinical crowns.
Okay. All right. Big question. How does in-house printing affect costs, lab fees, and profitability for practices? Let's talk about costs.
That is a great question. And out of all the things that I nerd out on, like cost is one of those things that I don't nerd out on that quite as much. So Bill Lehman, he uses Lux Creo, and I know he's dialed it down to like the penny, calculating in the staff time with the computer, with the waste, with everything. I want to say that the material costs are around $6 in a liner. The resin is the most expensive part.
Okay.
I want to say and it's way more expensive than model resin for sure. So I want to say that the actual average aligner, it's between $4 and $6 per aligner, is just the resin portion of it. So then you have to add, of course, the purchase of the machine and the longevity of the machine, and when you have to swap out the membranes, and again your staff time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, it's probably somewhere between 12 and 16 if I had to guess.
Okay.
But it's way less than $17.99 a case or whatever. You know what I mean? That's all I focus on. I'm like, okay, well, I'm paying way less than I would be like ordering a case from any aligner company. And so the math pencils out for me. But for me, it's more like this is super cool. Like it allows me to do some things that I haven't been able to do in the past. And like the costs are only going to get better, right? Like as technology improves, there's going to be more competition. There's going to be more resin companies that come out. There's going to be more printers capable of doing things at lower costs. So I figure like if it's already cheaper now, it's only going to get cheaper than that. And so I see the cost as definitely an overall net positive. But that wouldn't be the reason I would do it. Because if the reason you're doing it's cost, you're not going to spend the time that you need to work through some of the kinks. You just want it to work the same or something and pay less. That's not the answer for you. Yeah.
Okay. So what's next for you in terms of moving this process forward and integrating it further?
Yeah, so my next thoughts are we need to work with companies to get this integrated in a way where some of this manual process that we're currently doing is now plug and play, and or we do have like actual systems or rules where we can order a case, and depending on how many teeth they have, depending on how many teeth they're missing, depending on how tipped the teeth are, depending on how long the clinical crowns are, depending on how much undercut there are, like the software, especially with AI, like it should be able to figure that stuff out for us. Like if we give it some guidelines, it should be able to produce an aligner that fits every time and that has the appropriate amount of retention per tooth. Now, I know it's not simple. I know it's not easy. Otherwise, someone would have already done it. But it is possible. And so for me, like I want to, to integrate with companies who are willing to, to listen and to make changes and get this material better on a more global level, because that's what we're going to need if we're going to have like more broad adaptation. But it's the same thing that happened with direct print models. Like when we were first printing models, like, you had a handful of us out there that were printing models, and everybody else was like, oh man, they're dealing with a lot of stuff. Man, these guys are dealing with a lot of, and we were, right?
Yeah.
And so, but we worked through that, and like again, more companies came on the scene, more innovation happened. Every time a new company joins the market, like better stuff happens.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw that with Invisalign. For years, they were the only player in town. Now there's 100 aligner companies, and look how far aligners have come since that happened. So yeah, the more companies that get in the game, the more orthodontists that get in the game. I want to collaborate with more like-minded people like that in order to really advance this and make it, even better than what we're doing today, not only from its potential capabilities, but actually the entire system be better. And I think that's where it's going.
Okay. And then final question, what's your advice to your peers who are thinking of onboarding this type of technology?
Yeah, well, so one thing would be like I wouldn't make this my first printing technology, truthfully. Like
Definitely,
I
yeah.
yeah, I would start with models. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, what I mean, like just it's like get comfortable like
Let's
doing like
assume they
yeah.
have a 3D lab
Yeah,
already.
yeah, 100%. Yeah. So my advice, I would do your own research, right? I mean,
Mhm.
like they say, the two big players are Graphene and Lux Creo. There are pros and cons to both of them. So I would do your research and figure out what's going to work best for you. As far as, there's software differences, for instance. So depending on what you're doing, I would definitely do some homework there.
Mhm.
And then I would say, like, honestly, like if you're at a volume where you can justify the cost of the printer, I think the printers are around 20 grand or so.
Mhm.
Like if you're going to make that up in a couple months cases, for instance, like I would just do it. Like
Mhm.
schedule some time and like just jump in because you're not going to learn until you actually get your feet wet, so to speak. The onboarding process was very good with Lux Creo. Like
Okay.
like you have to go through this whole video like 4 hour training process. Like to even unbox it. They're like, "Hey, don't touch this box until you've watched these videos." So
Okay.
so Melanie and I, like, we watched them together. Like it's a whole, but it's good. I mean, we learned a
Uh-huh.
lot of stuff. We're taking notes because again, the processes are different. So that's important.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would do it. I have a doc reach out to me last week, and actually, I don't want to say this. I'm not offering to do this for anybody, so don't email me. But like, he was on the fence about whether to order one. Like I'm like, dude, just send me a case. I'll print it for you. You can try it
Mhm.
out. And Lux Creo might do that for you. I
Yeah.
mean, or Graphene might do that for you. I don't
Yeah.
know. If they will, great, take them up on it. But just know that it'll allow you to try a case, but it's not going to allow you to try a case with a lot of customization. You have to
Mhm.
do that on your own right now. So if you're going to have those companies try out a case, I would say try out a crowded case with normal length teeth. So not like too long with a ton of recession, not too short. Just do like a normal length with like a good, decent, normal, mild to moderate amount of crowding, and try it out with that because the AI settings that they use are pretty good for that type of
Mhm.
case.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say if you want to just try one, try it out like that. But honestly, like you're not going to get really good at this, nor are you going to see like a ton of benefit from this unless you actually do it. So yeah.
All right. Well, Dr. Manuele, thank you so much for your expertise and sharing your experience with this technology. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Allison. Glad to be here, and yeah, we'll catch up again soon.
Definitely.
As always, thank you for joining us. Be sure to subscribe to the Orthodontic Products Podcast to keep up with the latest episodes, and be sure to check out orthodonticproductsonline.com to keep up with the latest industry news. Until next time, take care.